This is a quick conversation about a concept called shared value, particularly when it comes to the brand communications industry. And Musa Kalenga, the Group Chief Executive Officer here at the Brave Group, says understanding the concept when it comes to the media and communications industry has never been more important. He says, and he'll expand on it right now, it's about creating economic benefits that uplift the whole of society, something which I would contend we need more than ever. So maybe a good starting point, Musa, is what's your understanding or definition of shared value, and why do you see fit to raise it now?
Thanks, Jeremy. I think, so shared value as a concept, I think it's timeless because of where we find ourselves for a number of reasons, as a planet, but more importantly as a country. It's trying to connect the dots between economic benefit and how we participate as enterprises in the economy and the value we create, the total value we create. Now that's not only from shareholder perspective, but from everybody in the value chain. So for me, why it's important now is that we are finding ourselves having to think about our response and how we show up in the economy, but also more importantly, what that means from a societal impact perspective. Secondly, the appreciation that we are in an ecosystem, right? And the ecosystem view is that, rising tide should lift all boats. We don't have the benefit anymore for there to be boats that are rising and others that are sinking, if I stay with the analogy. And so shared value for me is a really elegant way of trying to integrate that thought. It also forces us as an agency business, which traditionally was quite inward facing, to be far more outward in our growth mindset about creating value for our clients.
It's a very grand concept. It's an important concept. But in an industry, not only in this country, but around the world, that is capacity stressed and margin pushed, it's difficult to try and inculcate that new way of thinking.
Absolutely. Look, it's not an easy thing to do, and hence why it's baked into our purpose, right? It's something that we believe that we are going to have to fly the flag for the next 5 to 10 years. But we think that there's probably 3 levels at which we'll be able to drive impact. The first is if we consider being in the media advertising space and what we've seen happening around not only people's information, but the challenge with information and the way it's been used to be weaponized and ultimately decaying societal context all over the world. We think that as an advertising communication business, we've got a role to play in addressing and fixing that. Why? Because we are in the business of developing compelling messages to these markets. So first and foremost, we've got a job to do with our clients to ensure that is happening and happening responsibly. Secondly, from the stories that we tell and the narrative that is developing around Africa and South Africa, there's an important aspect of balance and creativity that we have to bring. We're very fortunate. We've got amazing businesses and amazing brands to work with, and our ability to manifest them, not only to impact our current appreciation of where we are as a continent, but also to set up the generations that come after us to appreciate and step into a wave or an understanding of what our impact can be, and to embrace it is the second one. And then the third is that the shaping of societal trends, right? So the appreciation now that we are able to be on global platforms and people are able to appreciate us for being African value creators and brand builders. The sounds of our continent are all over the world. If you listen to BAT or any of these global platforms, the sounds of our continent are all over the world. So we've got a huge responsibility to continue to understand how that value not only stays at the top, but trickles down. The third aspect is in our own business, right? When we think about shared value, we've got teams of people that come to work every day. They wear their hearts on their sleeves, they create amazing content, and content creators, brand builders, creatives, typically are individuals that put their heart and soul into the craft. And so we've got a responsibility to create a safe space in our business that remunerates people correctly, that rewards people correctly, and that provides platform for them to step onto.
So it's about creating this collaborative environment.
Absolutely.
How do you lead people into that environment?
It's a great question, and I think that's why it's been a painful last couple of months, because the first and most important thing is that people believe in the purpose, right? So thinking about what shared value through creativity means has been vital to bring people on the journey. In the beginning, when I started speaking about this idea of shared value through creativity, it was a bit of a nebulous concept, understandably so. And so the last 8-9 months, we've spent a lot of time and energy helping people understand what that actually means, how that connects to our purpose. So in our business, creating shared value through creativity is lived out through a mission, which is all about becoming unforgettable. And in our space, becoming unforgettable is the equivalent of being etched into history, which typically goes along with developing memorable content, developing memorable campaigns. And last but not least, it's underpinned by three very clear pillars. The one is that we care, the second is we dare, and the third is that we share. And each one of those is important for everyone in our business to understand and wake up in the middle of the night and be able to recite. So that's been really, really important. We are now in the phase, fortunately, where we've come through that education, that internal understanding, that internal orientation, and people are really starting to live out those values, and they're starting to understand it. So it's taken a bit of time, but I think it was the right thing to do, and I'm very comfortable with where we are as a business and our internal understanding of that message.
Let me put to you that the caring and the sharing part of the equation is the easy part, maybe. It's the daring which carries inherent risk.
Absolutely.
How do you get to be more daring?
So we've got a gift and a curse, right? The idea of bravery is baked into not only our name, but our philosophy and our heritage. When we talk about being brave, by design, it is about being daring, right? And so it served us very well because as a challenger agency, when you work with businesses that have got an appreciation of where you can go with a more brave and more daring attitude, you're able to develop and create amazing communication. The risk that you speak about is also very true. And so a big part of how we've tried to orientate not only our orchestration or client service teams is to develop a level of empathy in how they manage clients towards an outcome that is potentially bigger than where they started, but how to be empathetic around understanding the risks that may carry. So when we come up with big ideas, great concepts, solutions that sometimes clients will look at and go, whoa, that is just too much, there's a way in which you manage that so that it doesn't erode the relationship that you have with your clients. But it's incumbent on us to take them there because it's inherent in our name.
It's also about having a thick enough skin to accept that on that road there's going to be failure.
Absolutely. And I think the growth mindset that we've been trying to drive is that is okay, right? It's going to be challenge after challenge, issue after issue, and that's just part of the course. But the process around helping people to develop that thick skin is challenging. We are now much better at it. I must say proudly is that it's taken quite a bit of time, but we're skilling up our managers, we're skilling up our senior leads from a creative perspective to have that interdisciplinary conversation, so that it also doesn't always feel like you have to carry that burden on your own. So the thick skin is one, but the power of the network is another. So we can absorb some of those shocks as a team.
Taking the conversation away from the brave group and maybe looking at it more holistically.
Yeah.
How do you set about defining a purpose, given that there's this whole concept of maybe purpose washing is a good way of describing it.
Absolutely.
And it's inauthentic.
Yeah.
You've got to spend a lot of time defining what that purpose is. In your journey, how did you start? What advice can you give to your client set and to, I guess, even to other agency chief executives?
It's a great question.
It's not easy.
No, it's a great question. So it was quite a personal journey for me, to be honest, because I've always had a love-hate relationship with agencies, right? Which I've said.
Says the man running one, yes.
Which I've said many times, which has got me into trouble, but it's my truth. And so in trying to come into a space where I thought I could create value and take this business to the next level, it was important for me to have a long, hard look in the mirror personally. And then do the same thing for the business, right? And so the starting point here was actually quite a detailed unpacking of our key challenges as an agency. Now, some of them are specific to us as a Brave Group. Some of them are inherent in our industry. The key takeout from me after going through that process is that we're trying to address the issue of trust, right? If you want to call it the insight around our purpose is that we're trying to address the issue of trust. At its core, there's been a fundamental erosion of trust between agencies and clients. And when that dawned on me, I started to realize that the journey we need to go on is to engender trust and rebuild that into our interactions with our clients, and therefore have a better chance of moving into the space of becoming a strategic partner. The idea of partnership without trust is a vacuous concept, right? It's just not there. And so that was a starting point, right? And I had to believe that, being able to get back into a place where we had trust-based relations with our clients would lead to the value that we need to create. And so shared value was one of the ways that I thought was really a great holistic solve to the issue of trust. develops value for us as an agency, develops value for the client, develops value for the ecosystem. And so the question is, when you're all trying to develop value for the ecosystem, then you have to work in a far more integrated and trusting way. So that really was the journey around arriving at this idea of shared value through creativity. And I tested that idea. I went to a few of our clients and I sat down, I had the conversation. I tested, number one, that the issue of trust was actually kind of the core thing, and it was. Secondly, I then tested the idea, the solve, the purpose. And I had some really, really encouraging conversations with our clients. I did, and they're driving for transparency, they're driving for definitely having more robust conversations, but it's that much more difficult if there isn't any trust in the relationship. So after testing it with our clients, I then went through the process internally to test it with our teams. And hence the last 8-9 months has been the adoption after that process.
So in conclusion then, your argument makes perfect sense. How do you know when you have achieved optimum share value? Because you're in the business of measurement here.
Absolutely. So that's a double-edged sword. So number one, I don't think you should get to a point where you have, right? So if you do, then there is a problem. I think the definition of shared value is going to evolve, because as we solve one problem, new problems will emerge. And our challenge is to make sure that for a period that we're solving specific problems, we're able to measure those problems, right? So in our case right now, our challenge is to be the most valued independent agency, and we measure that with the radar score, right? If we look at our clients that have been giving us feedback, our radar score has increased. So I can tell you very clearly that we are doing that. Secondly, we measure that by being an integrated business. Integrated business for me means that I measure the revenue that's moving around between our business divisions. And if I understand that our revenue is moving up between our business divisions, by definition, it means that they're working closer together. That for me ticks the box around integration. So I think for the period that we're in now, I can very clearly articulate how we're measuring shared value. But I also think that in the next 8 to 12 months, that those metrics might have to change. In my view, they're going to have to become a little bit more client-focused, because we're now moving out of the phase of having the digital transformation. We've got some technologies in place. And so now we can put in metrics that allow us to measure the shared value with a leaning towards our clients. And as we figure out whether we've solved that or not, we'll be able to change those metrics accordingly as well. So I think it's actually the exercise of being nimble enough to continue changing the metrics, but for the period that you're measuring, it's clear to know what you need to do.
And that is another brave conversation. Musa Kalenga, thank you.
Thank you, sir.